ask or get a cohorted breakdown of the key relevant data sets that you're looking at. You don't have to do this for every data point all the time, but when it matters, be aware that, double clicking on some of them actually helps quite a bit. Number 2, expect to see a power law distribution following the Pareto Principle, which is the 80-20 rule, right? The 20% of the input will generate 80% of the output. There is always that relationship. Also, trade-offs to parse through the data are going to be required. So expect to have to go through that exercise as a team. Number 3, data tells a story, but breakdowns tell a better story by putting into focus what really moves the needle, right? Way easier, way better to focus on the stuff that really matters and have decisions and strategies around like that slice of your population that really moves the needle and impact your revenue and growth objectives. Key takeaway, if you ask me, this is the one soundbite. This is the tweetable quote, right? Data-driven decisions. Every one of us constantly talks about them. We are a data-driven company. I'm a data-driven operator. We take data-driven decisions. Yes, but data-driven decisions based on average data, we only get you average results. And we can do better than that, right? That's it on my end. That's my hot take for today to kick the day off. Now, Gary, if you don't mind jumping in for Q&A so that we can unpack some of the things that we were touching on.
Yeah, happy to. Hi, Armando. Great job. We have a few questions already in the chat, but I'll start with one of my own, and then we'll jump into some of those. I guess so for everybody listening, from a kind of practical perspective, in terms of how it impacts your operations, how it impacts your revenue, why the cohorted view? Obviously, it tells you more granularly, but how can it impact your business?
Yeah, the one thing that I tend to think about is that as you get that deeper level of understanding on what's contributing to the overarching number, you essentially are applying a decision framework, right? You say, hey, like there is going to be a different makeup for each and every one of those cohorts. And so tracking those independently, but still in aggregated way, will give you a more informed point of view. And so instead of saying, hey, we need to improve our T2P conversion from 2% to 3%, now let's talk about what are we doing for that high-performing cohort and how does that high-performing cohort looks like? Or like going back to the example of ACV, right? One thing is looking at ACV on average, and that will include an aggregate makeup of all those 300 commercial customers. But the reality is that some of them are not like the others, right? And so focusing on like having a tiered down breakdown of that will drive you to a deeper level of understanding, and as a consequence, different type of actions around it.
Yeah. I think you hit on one of the key words that I think of. I think of focus and I think of sacrifice, right? Mm-hmm. The average, I think, is a great bellwether directionally telling you where things are going. But if you're going to make operational decisions, i.e., I want to increase my ACV,
right?
Well, perhaps the secret there is actually focusing on that segment that has the higher contract value and deprioritizing the activities to that long tail of lower paying customers, right? If I'm thinking about increasing my open rate or my click-through rate on an email program, well, maybe it's not about tweaking call to actions, or maybe it's about wholesale, like eliminating an underperforming program as opposed to small marginal changes, right?
Yeah. It always comes down to trade-offs, right? Like when you talk about focus, like the implied part of the conversation, which I think having breakdowns helps surface is the fact that we are always constantly operating in a world of limited resources, limited time, limited headcount, limited, focus. And so you constantly need to make trade-offs. And so being able to have a better decision framework to your point, focus on the stuff that matters versus deprioritizing the stuff that doesn't too much or doesn't serve your overarching objective, it's a better way of operating, if you ask me.
For sure. Cool. Let's go to the audience. So Vincenzo asks, can you further segment the ACV cohorts, i.e. SMB, mid-market, enterprise? And as an extension to that question, can you generalize the ROI for each segmented cohort relative to investment in CAC?
Yes, absolutely. And you should. You absolutely should. One recommendation there, I usually go by the rule of three, right? 3 or 4 cohorts is good enough. Some companies might go overboard and start to be overly granular. I don't necessarily think that being overly granular helps either, because that increases the amount of work and time that you need to get that visibility and doesn't necessarily improve too much the following conversation, right? Having 5 or 10 or 15 cohorts instead of 3, sure, but how, are we helping the conversation? Are we moving?
Yeah, and I think it's totally kind of like you develop your own framework for it. I'm a big fan of quintiles, right? Using quintiles gets you rapidly to the Pareto Principle, right? Because, it's groups of 20%, right? So, I think you can go overboard in the analysis, but as long as you think of a framework that works for you and you use that repeatedly, I think this becomes kind of second nature.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Christine asks, why not just take the median?
That's a really good question. And hey, Christine, you guys will see her later on as a speaker as well. I think, so the median is, again, directionally useful, but you're sacrificing the edges. And edges are, in some cases, relevant because they are not, aberration to your focus, but point to what the future could look like. And so having a way to represent edges in parallel to the median area, I think it's actually really relevant for comprehensive conversations.
Yeah. Listen, I think the medium is great. It's a great shortcut to buffer out the outliers, right? It's a great way to get the noise of the extremes out of the conversation. And it's actually a good way to set a target for your average, in my opinion. But yeah, I think the granularity of these cohorted views are the ones that really drive to operational decisions, this idea of focus and sacrifice, right? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Armando, we're at time.